Let me show you how to make this shop stool with all the stuff that I learned from making this prototype shop stool. And even better, it's available in your free trial version of our software. So for this project, I'm going to use Cut2D Desktop. Now you don't need to use that software for this project. Of course, if you have vcarve or Aspire, then you can add all kinds of interesting elements to this. But I want this to be available for any of our core software customers. Let's not also forget that this is going to be a trial-friendly project. So if you're new to Vectric and you haven't purchased our software and you'd like to give the software a go and you think this project is exactly what you'd like to try to cut, then this file will be available for you to open up into the trial version of Cut2D Desktop, Cut2D Pro, vcarve Desktop, vcarve Pro, or Aspire, and you can save off the toolpaths, and then you can go ahead and cut them. Another thing I want to just say ahead of time before we get too far into this, I'm going to give you 3 different files. You're going to have one that's going to be set up for millimeters, which is going to be based on 18 millimeter plywood. I'm going to give you another one that's going to be set up for 3/4 inch plywood. That way you don't need to go ahead and edit too much if you've got that on hand. And then I'm going to give you just a plain Jane file without me taking into consideration the thickness of your material. That way you can go back and edit that based on whatever you have kicking around the shop. Unfortunately, just the first 2 files will actually work well with your trial version of your software, where the third one is more for people who have our full version, so you can go ahead and edit anything you want to. Okay, let's get that out of the way. So here I have a fresh Cut2D Desktop open. Now, before we get too much farther again, I'm going to, full disclosure here, is I've already pre-cut a sample of this already. This was my original design that I was kind of hoping would work out, and I could literally just copy it and give you guys the file. But I made some mistakes, and it was good that I made those mistakes so that I can point them out to you. First thing is really important when it comes to a slot together project. You want to make sure that you have a nice, accurate measurement of the thickness of your material. That way your pockets are the right thickness, or the right width, excuse me, which in this case I didn't account for. And also you'll be able to make an accurate height of your tabs that fit into these pockets, which in this case I did get right-ish, but still it's that if I had done it correctly and got a nice measurement, then it would have fit together much better. Also, I made a bit of a design flaw here on the end of the legs. I rounded it over. I thought it might look kind of nice, but what that did was it lessened the amount of contact you have on the floor of the stool. So I don't think it contributed to be a bit wobbly, but I think there's no need to have it there. So in this version that I'm going to show you now, we're going to take that off of there. Okay, so let's get right into showing you how I did that. And this is going to be straight up from scratch. Brand new file, nothing pre-done here at all. So let's create a new file. Now, before I started actually designing this, I had to do a little research on the internet, and I found out that most of the stools of this sort of size and height are 18 inches tall and about 15 inches wide, 14 to 15 inches wide for the top seat of it. So I'm going to go with those dimensions. So my first sheet that I'm going to set up is going to be 20 by 20. And I'm going to use this first sheet solely as a design sheet. And whatever I come up with here, I'm then going to move on to the sheets. And I'm going to update those sheets for the right thickness and so on that I need for my job. So we're going to start off here. So it's a single-sided job, 20 by 20. And I'm guessing at this point that it's going to be 3/4 inch plywood, which we know isn't correct, but right now I'm going to start out this way. That way I can design it. I can just have some fun. The chances are pretty good. You're in your house designing this thing up. You don't have access to your material. So this is a great workflow for you just to get your ideas into the software and then start working away. We're going to be zeroing off our material surface. Our data will be set at the bottom left-hand corner, and we're going to click OK. So the first thing I want to start off with is I'm going to go over to my 3D view. We're going to try to do as much as we can of this job or this project in the 3D view, showing off some of the nice new features of version 12.5. So let's go ahead and start by drawing the top of the seat. So this is going to be a rectangle, and we're just going to draw a rectangle in there. Doesn't matter what size it is. We're going to make this about I fluked 14 inches. So we're going to type in 14, and we're going to press tab, and we're going to make this 0.75 an inch tall. Again, just happen to be lucky. I happen to nail it perfectly. Press enter, and then we're going to press escape and get out of that form. Now, that's just a rectangle. what we're doing is we're drawing the side view of this stool. So that looks about right. Let's go ahead and center that in the middle of our job space, and we'll close this down. The next thing we're going to want to do is create a leg. I want just the very basic bits of this stool. I don't want to get too much into the design of it. I just want to actually have the basic things I need to make this stool. As I said a minute ago, a stool is going to be about 18 inches tall. So let's grab another rectangle, and we're just going to draw a box, another rectangle box. The width of my leg, I'm going to make it 3 inches. Press tab on my keyboard to move to the next field. And I want to make this not 18 inches tall, because 18 plus the thickness of my material is going to be too much. So I'm going to go 18 minus 0.75. Now I do know that when I do measure up my material, that the top of this is going to be a different thickness. So I'm going to fix this a bit later, but the overall height of my stool will be probably a little bit less than 18 inches, but I think it's not really going to matter in the end. It's a little bit short, not a big deal. Press equals and then press enter. And now that is the right size leg. So let's press escape, and we're just going to use our cursor keys to kind of nudge that where it needs to belong. Hold down my shift key, grab that top of my bench. We're just going to put this in the middle of my page somewhere like that. That looks great. Now I'd like to copy that leg across my job. So this is a thing we show all the time. If I grab that vector or whatever I'd like to copy across my job, I can hold down my control key, which means copy. With that held down, hold down my shift key, and then that means across one of the two center points, and H means horizontal, and you'll see it just copies it across the middle. So there we have it. We have pretty much everything we need to get started, except for we need to look or think about the top of our stool. Now, this stool could be any shape. It could be a round, it could be a square. I'm going to choose to use a polygon. So we're going to draw a polygon. Again, right in my 3D view, I want it to be 6-sided. I want the radius to be 7, the scale, the size to be 7. So if I just click anywhere here, you'll see that will draw it. Also, you'll see that we have those fields ready for you to type into. So if you didn't want to have that dialogue on the left-hand side already pre-filled out, then you can just do it here. So I could change this to be 6 if I wanted it to be, or I could change it to be 7, which I'm going to leave it at 7, and then just press enter, press escape, and there now I have that, and I can move that down to where I want it to be. And we're just going to then center that in left to right in my job so everything lines up perfectly. That looks good. Very happy with that. The next thing I want to do is think about the top of my stool. I don't like those real sharp corners on it. So one of the neat new features of version 12.5 is that we can create fillets right in our 3D view. So we're going to zoom in a little bit so we can see that. Go over to my fillet tool. And without doing a whole lot in my dialog over here, I'm just going to hover over the corners that I'd like to add in a fillet. And if we zoom in with those current settings that we have, you'll see that it's going to show me what that fillet's going to look like even before I decide to go ahead and say I want or accept that change. I can go ahead now and can click the normal fillet. And once I've done that, then I can go ahead and use my arrow keys to go through the different fillet shapes. And as you see, the cursor will change as I go to be whatever fillet is chosen over here on the right-hand side, which is really handy indication of what we're going to do. So let's go back to a normal fillet, and we are going to go ahead and hold down my left mouse button, and I'm going to drag it in. And you'll see that now I can drag some arbitrary number shape that I want. So let's make this around 2 inches maybe. And once I'm happy with that, I can let go of my mouse. And that's great. And you'll see that my form is updated with that new dimension. So now I can just go ahead and click all of these corners that I'd like to have, and it will just go ahead and apply that fillet to those corners, and I'll get a nice round top. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We can close that down. Everything looks really good there. Something to keep in mind that's important is now I need to adjust the width of this rectangle because it's not correct anymore based on the top-down view. And we can see that if I drag in a guideline. Another new thing in version 12.5 is I can put guidelines in my 3D view. So you'll see that in the 2D view, normally you would drag it in from the rulers that are along the left and the top of your viewing window, but in this case, we need to right-click anywhere in the 3D view, and then we're going to go down to Guidelines, and we're going to insert a vertical guideline, and there it is right there. It's in the 3D view. I can drag it. I can go ahead and move it back and forth. I can rotate it if I would like to, which is nice. It'll snap if I want to. So we're just going to go ahead and snap that there. And you'll see that the top of our seat actually got a little bit smaller because we've radiused that off. So we're going to get we want to make sure that our side view is accurate so that we can place our legs in the right spot that we want them to be. So we're going to grab this rectangle, we'll hold down our shift key, and when I hold down my shift key, I can scale it in and out, and I can just go ahead and click that. That's great. Perfect. So now that is the right width of top that I have. Now let's think a little bit about positioning these legs on that, on our top, where we want them to be. This is totally subjective, and probably it's best that you test it to make sure that it's safe. As I said, I've already got one made, so I kind of have a good idea of where I would like them to be. In this case, because I have this prototype available to me, I actually want to have these a little bit farther out to the outside edge. Although this is quite safe, and we've used it quite a lot in the office now, I would like to move them a little bit closer to the edge of the circle to give it a little bit more stability. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this guideline that I already have in place, and I am going to indicate where I like to have the inside of my leg to be. So in my case, I think it should be about 5 1/4 inches from the edge of my seat. So if I select that guideline, I go into that field and I add 5.25 and then press equals and then enter. That's going to move that guideline over to where it should be. That's great. So let's delete out the second leg. Let's zoom in and move this first leg over to where it needs to be. Then we'll zoom back out again and Control Shift and H again to copy that across our job. So Control Shift and H. And there we have where the other leg needs to be. Now let's think a little bit about the shape of these legs. They look great, straight. Not probably. We want the bottom of them to be as close to the edge as we can, so we've got that nice sort of stability that we talked about. So here's some nice little tips that you can do when you're node editing in the 3D view. So I'm going to add in another guideline just for fun here, and we're going to insert one vertically, and I'm going to drag it over so that it's there. So I've got a visual reference to where the edge of my stool is. Now I'm going to grab both of these legs. I'm going to go into node mode, and then I'm going to press H on my keyboard. And as soon as I do that, you'll see there's that purple line down the middle of my job. Any nodes, if I have nodes or like nodes selected on both sides of that line, if I move them on one side, it's going to mirror the movement on the other side, which is great. So if I grab these 4 at the bottom and I use my cursor keys now, you'll see that now it's mirroring those to the other side. That's really nice and easy. Next thing we want to do is grab all of those nodes, and we're going to turn them into Beziers, okay? And then we're going to grab these top 4, and we're going to use our cursor keys again to get us a nice shape at the top. Let's grab these 2 bottom ones, move them out. And there we have it. Nice looking stool legs, I think, to start out with. That looks great. Perfect. So let's go ahead and delete these guidelines out of here. I'm going to select that one and press delete on my keyboard. This one, delete on my keyboard, because I don't need those anymore. Okay, so the next thing we want to think about is the pockets at the top and the tabs for our legs. So we're going to grab a rectangle, and we'll draw our tabs first. We're just going to draw a rectangle in here, and we're going to make this 2 inches wide and about 0.75 inches tall. Because it snapped to the geometry I had already, or the rectangle I had already, then it's happy, so I'll just press enter. Let's close this down. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it so that it will snap to the center of that leg there. That looks good right there. Perfect. And we are going to go Control Shift H. We'll copy that over there. So now we have our other one over there. That looks good. So we've got tabs now. The thickness of the top that's there, which again, we haven't measured to be sure that's right. And now let's take this one, and we're going to hold down our Control and our Alt key, and we're going to drag it up, and we're going to snap it right there where it belongs. And then we're going to go Control Shift H again, copy it across. We'll grab both of those 2 vectors, hold down our Alt key and our Control key. That's going to copy it. But as I rotate it, it's going to lock it into those different increments so that it makes it a little bit easier to position. Put that where it belongs. And that's great. So now if we have 4 legs cut, we have 4 legs with tabs cut, excuse me. We have all of those slots cut at the top, or all those pockets. Then this should fit together and we should have a stool. The last thing I'd like to do is to add in a rectangle here for a handle. So we're going to grab the rectangle tool again, and we're just going to draw a rectangle. It's going to be 4 inches. We'll tab over by 1 inch. That looks great. Press enter. Escape out of that. We'll grab that, and we're just going to just eyeball that in here somewheres. It doesn't need to be perfect. The only thing I need to think about is that this is going to be a hole. So when I stick my leg up in the bottom of this, I don't want to be able to see the lip of the edge of my leg kind of creeping in there. That might look a little funny. So that looks pretty decent like that. Now, and because the shape, I like it to be round, I can select that. Because I'm in the 3D view, I can grab this handle right there, just drag it in, and it will radius off all those 4 corners for me to make a nice handle. Now that's pretty much all that we need right now for our design. The next thing we need to think about is actually what's going to happen when we cut it, and the geometry of our tool, the thickness of our material. So let's go ahead and fix all that. So I have a piece of this, a cut off of the material that we're going to use. It's a nice looking piece of plywood. Well, I say nice looking. It's not the best quality plywood in the world, but it'll do the trick. And I can use my calipers to get a nice accurate reading of how thick this is. And that's really important. Again, reiterating what I said earlier, that if you don't have a nice accurate measurement, then your pockets aren't going to be wide enough or tall enough, depending on which way you're looking at them. And your tab won't be either long enough or it'll be too long and stick out the top or the side of your slot together project. So let's go ahead and change that right now. All of this, the top of this table, the top of our stool, excuse me, and the width of these, our tabs are all set to be based on a 1/4 inch material. We need to fix that. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to grab this top, and we're going to go ahead and choose this line, the dot at the bottom here. That way we can change the height of this. Change this to 0.7. Press enter, and you'll see that it's changed for me. All I need to do is just hold down my Alt key and drag it into place. That's good. Hold down my Shift key, grab both of those boxes, and go ahead and just snap that to the top of that. And there we have now the tabs are the right height, 0.7 of an inch, so they won't pop out the top of our material, and they'll fit in there nicely. Now the next thing we need to do is to adjust the actual slots here at the top. So let's delete out these pockets. Let's delete these out of here, and we're going to go back to this first one. And we are going to, again, go ahead and change this to be 0.7. Press enter. I'm going to need to now go ahead and make sure that it is still centered within that top shape. So we're going to go over to our alignment tools. We'll center that. We'll close that down. Let's grab this one, and we're going to hold down our Control, Shift, and H, copy it across. Again, Control and Alt, move those around. And there we go. Now we've gone ahead and corrected all of that, all of those errors that we made based on the fact that I thought my original material was going to be 0.75 an inch thick. Now the next thing we need to think about is the geometry of our tool. We're going to be using this 1/4 inch compression cutter. A compression cutter is important because it's made so that when you cut through material, you're going to get a nice surface finish and a nice underside finish. That's because the bottom bit of this bit is an upcut bit and the top bit is a downcut bit. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future or later on in this project. But for right now, the most important bit is looking at the end of this tool. It's round. Any internal corners that we cut are going to end up having a radius inside. That means that anything that we want to fit into those pockets that we're using an outside cut, which would mean they're nice and sharp, is not going to fit. They're going to get hung up on those radius corners. So to get around that, we're going to do a couple things. First of all, we're going to fix the actual tops of the legs here. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of these rectangles, and I'm going to drag them into my legs. Then we're going to go and select this leg and this tab, and we're going to bake that together. And the same with this one, this leg, and this fellow there. And we're going to bake that one together as well. Or weld it together, not bake, weld it together. And now we have one vector, continuous vector all around the outside of that. And now what we can do is we can add a fillet on the inside of here. Remember, it's an inside corner, so we're going to have a radiused inside corner there, which isn't going to help us any. So we need to get rid of that material, and to do that, by adding a fillet at 0.125 an inch, which is the radius of this tool, we can go ahead and ensure that that tool will get in there and give us enough room for those sharp corners to fit in. We're gonna use a dog bone fillet, and we're gonna just select that, and this one, and that one. And that's great. So now our tool can get in, get rid of that, and then you'll see that we can put a nice piece, if you look at that red line there, you can see that we can put a nice square part in there without any issues at all. The next thing we want to do is take a look at the pockets up top, or the slots. And we want to do exactly the same thing, except for we want to make sure that we put them on the outside, and we're going to get the same radius at 0.125. Oh, you'll see that for some reason I didn't have that set quite right. So we'll go back and we'll correct those other, it'll just take a quick second. Just be careful when you do that you don't drag your mouse a bit. You just click down, because if you drag it, it's going to go ahead and update your radius to be wrong. So just double check that to make sure that's correct. Okay, so that all looks good now that I've gone ahead and fixed all those. I'm happy with that. Let's just recheck these guys down here at the bottom to make sure they're right. I'm just going to re-put those back in again. I'm not confident that I didn't move the mouse like I said. Perfect. That looks good. So those are all updated with the 0.125 inch radius. That's great. Close. Great. So we have everything that we've done. We've taken into consider everything that we need to. So let's go ahead and set up our sheets now. Now I'm going to set this up so, like I had said, you can use desktop for this. So each of these sheets is not going to be any bigger than 24 inches. So you can go ahead and cut this on your machine if you have the capacity to. So one of the other nice new features of 12.5 is that we can duplicate sheets, which makes life really easy. And not only will it duplicate your toolpaths, it'll duplicate your vectors, any 2D geometry you have, or any 3D components onto a brand new sheet. In this case, I don't have any toolpaths or 3D stuff, but you still get the idea of how you can use it. So let's go over to our sheets. I'm going to right click on sheet 1, and I'm going to duplicate that. Now while I'm here, let's take a look at our 2D view first of all, so we can see there's a duplicated sheet there. We're going to go ahead and rename these just quickly so that we can keep track of everything. So we're going to call this design sheet, and then we're going to call this other one legs, because this is where we're going to put our legs on here. Okay, so we're going to go to that sheet there, and we're going to delete all the stuff we don't need. I don't need any of this. Don't need that, and I don't need this. I'm going to keep one of those, and I'll tell you why in a second. Don't need this leg either, because all these legs are exactly the same. I'm just going to go ahead and drag that over there. Now hold down my Control and my Alt key. I want to make 4 of these, so I'm just going to drag them across, sort of eyeballing the position they need to be in. That looks good. And then we're going to drag this shape down. Now this shape is going to be used to create a test pocket, so that we can be sure that we have the right allowance set up, so that we can modify the pockets or the slots on the top of our seat, so everything will fit nicely. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. So we're going to make 2 of those, because you just never know, you might need to actually test 2 different allowances. Now, I'm not going to get too far into toolpathing these things. It's just a really basic set of toolpaths. We're going to use profiles and pockets. You should kind of already know how to do that already. If not, then we've got lots of videos out there for you to look at. I'm only going to point out the bits that are really important for this job to make sure everything fits together perfectly. So let's grab all 3 of these, all 4 of these, because it's not a 3-legged stool, it's 4. Let's go over to our Toolpaths tab. Now we have a chance to think about our material thickness. And we're going to do this every time. It's top tip for you when you're working in your software is to always check out your material setup before you go ahead and create any toolpaths. Even if you think it's right, it's always good to kind of review that. So we're going to set that. And in this case, it's wrong. Remember, I changed the thickness of my material, so we're going to change that to be 0.70 of an inch. Okay. We're going to start at the bottom left-hand corner. We're going to zero off our material surface. Our rapid Z gaps are safe and appropriate for our machine. Our start home position is exactly right. We're just going to click OK. Because I don't have any toolpaths created, it's not going to try and recalculate anything, so we're good to go. So now let's go ahead and create our first set of profile toolpaths. So we're going to have a start depth of 0 at the top of our material. We're going to cut down Z plus 0.01 of an inch. Now I'm going to use Z in there because if I did by mistake get different plywood maybe, and I want to just adjust it just slightly, I can go ahead and change my material thickness, recalculate my toolpaths, and it'll swap in the thickness of my material for that Z. So it makes it really kind of nice. It's a good little variable. We're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, and we're going to just check that to make sure everything is fine with that one. It's 1/4 inch end mill. We've got 2 flutes on it. So like I said before, a compression cutter is just an end mill with two parts to it. There's the short bit, or the little bit at the bottom, is an upcut bit, and the other part of the cutter is a downcut bit. So we're just going to make sure that our pass depth is set to 1/4 inch or 1.25. That's great. Everything looks really good here, so we're going to click OK. So the trick with these cutters is that your first pass, before it actually engages with the side of your part, you want to make sure is down the depth of that upcut part of your bit plus a little bit, so that you're below the surface of your material. So you're not pulling up that surface, you're really just pushing it down using that downcut portion of your bit. And then when you come out the other side, then the upcut bit will be pulling up the bottom of your material and giving you a nice clean bottom finish. And so you have a nice bottom and a top finish using this neat new cutter. The thing that you need to be sure you do is to change your pass depths, okay? Each pass depth of this tool is going to be set to 1/8 of an inch, but we want to actually remove some of the passes out of here until we get to the pass that's a little bit more than that 1/4 inch part of my bit. So I've measured it, it's about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to delete those first two passes. So it's going to plunge in right down to 0.355 an inch and then start to do its work. And that way I'll have a nice surface finish, which will be great, perfect in this case. And we're going to click OK. Now, if for some reason you go in and change anything like your step down of your bit, you change your material thickness, then you need to go in and check those pass depths, because we'll reset those back to an equal amount. So you need to make sure that that is correct before you click calculate in the bottom. If you don't, then you're going to end up totally not using the benefits of this compression cutter. Okay, so that's really good. We're going to cut outside the line. We're not going to use any allowance offset for our legs. We're going to leave it just as it is. We're going to look at that a little bit later on. We're not going to do a separate last pass. We're going to add in some tabs. Those lengths and thicknesses look good. Let's edit our tabs. We're going to put in 4 tabs for each vector, each closed vector. And in this case, we're just going to let it do it because it does exactly what it needs to do. Those are exactly where I want them to be. That's perfect. Let's close that down. Now we might want to consider using ramps and leads. A ramp is, instead of your tool plunging straight down into your material, it's actually going to slowly ramp into your material, which is going to be quite helpful with your tool, especially if we're plunging in more than the diameter of my tool, which isn't always the best case. So to be on a ramp in gives it a nice sort of gentle kind of cut into it. So we're going to go ahead and ramp in a straight smooth ramp, a distance of about 1/2 inch, which I think will be enough. And then we want to lead. So we're actually going to start on the outside of our material a certain distance, and then we're going to ramp into it. And then when we hit the edge of our part, then we're going to be at the depth that we want it to be so that we're not tearing out our part. It's really quite a nice feature, and you should experiment with that whenever you can. Not only will it save the length of your tool and make sure maybe you don't chip them or break them as well. So it's always good. That all looks fine, everything looks great. So let's go ahead and calculate that. It's gonna give me a warning. I know I'm gonna cut through my material, that's all right. Let's quickly go ahead and preview those tool paths, and you'll see that there are our ramps and our leads at the top. If we turn on our tool paths, you'll see them right there, the light blue lines, and that's gonna look great. We will throw up a warning if we can't fit your ramps or leads in there. We might need to either cut them short or remove them totally. That way you can be ensured that you'll have a nice part in the end, but you may not be able to take advantage of those particular features unless you modify the parameters that you've used. That's great. So that's perfect. The next thing we want to do is turn back on our 2D vectors, and we're going to talk about these 2 little test pockets. So what we want to do is cut these legs out, break one of them out, and we want to test fit them into one of these 2 pockets so that we can reflect that pocket allowance to the top of our stool, and that way we're sure that our legs will fit in properly. So we're going to go and close this down. We'll select this bottom slot. We're going to make this a pocket. Now you can use a pocket or a profile, it's up to you. I think when I actually cut the finished one that we have, I had used a profile toolpath instead of a pocket, but it's up to you, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So we're going to start at 0. We're going to go down Z plus 0.01. We're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. We're just going to check that to make sure everything's safe and appropriate. If I make any changes here, Keep in mind, using that edit button, it'll only reflect within this toolpath. It doesn't update my tool database. So if I've made any changes here and I like the results on my CNC machine, I may want to go back to my tool database and update that from these numbers. That all looks great, so we're going to click OK. Again, we need to make sure that we edit those passes. We're going to delete out those first two, start at the 0.355 of an inch, click OK. Offset tooling is fine. That's all good. We are going to make sure that we use a pocket allowance. Now this is the magic number. This is where we're going to actually make these pockets a little bit bigger so we can be sure that we can, instead of jamming that plywood in there and chipping it all to pieces, we can just put it in there nice and easy. Maybe with a mallet would be kind of nice, just gently with a mallet, or we can slide them in and glue them in place if you want to. We don't want too much wiggle room. We want exactly the right amount of wiggle room. So we're going to go with first one minus 0.003, okay? And then we're going to update our name here to be pocket allowance. I'm going to call it PA 0.003, and then we'll calculate that. And again, we're going to get a warning. It's going to cut through our material. That's not a problem at all. Let's go and preview that visible toolpath. That looks really great. And then we can show that, and we'll go to our 2D view. And what's nice in our 2D view is if we have turned on our solid toolpath preview, we can see that we're overcutting that line just by a little bit, which is perfect. That's what we want. Now, the next thing we want to do is do the same set of toolpaths, same instructions at all, and everything for this other pocket. So let's go back to our 3D view, turn back on our vectors. Let's right click on this toolpath. We're going to duplicate this toolpath. When we open up this toolpath, this duplicated one, we're going to select this new vector. All the settings are exactly the same as before. We're just going to go ahead and change this last pocket allowance to 0.5, and we're going to change our toolpath name to 0.5, and we'll calculate that. We'll press OK, preview that visible toolpath. Oh, we'll preview all those toolpaths then, because I just reset that by mistake. Let's go to our 2D view, turn on that solid preview again, make sure we have those toolpaths selected, and zoom in and have a peek. Remember that 0.003? That's it there. The 0.005 is a little bit more, and you can see the difference. So once we get this all done and we figure out which pocket allowance is the right amount, then we'll reflect that in the top of our stool. So that's all we need for the legs. Great, perfect. Let's close this down. The next thing you want to do is now think about the top. So let's double click on the sheet number on this sheet over here. Let's go ahead and just quickly right click on this. And we're going to rename that design. And we'll press enter. Now we've got the name properly now. Let's right click. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to do this really quite simply. We're going to select those vectors, right click, and we're going to copy these to a new sheet. And this is going to create a new sheet. We're not going to copy all the rest of the stuff off of there. Let's go over to our sheet again. Let's go over to our sheet manager over here. And we're going to go to this new sheet that we created. We're going to select it and we're going to edit that. We're going to edit this, and we're just going to change the thickness of this to be 0.70. Now I don't need a full 20 by 20 sheet for this. We're going to make it 15 by 15. And you notice instead of me updating my thickness through my material setup in my tooling, I'm doing it here in my sheet manager, but making sure that I have the right sheet selected. That all looks good. Everything's fine. Let's just click OK. It's just warning me that some of my toolpaths will cut through. That's not a big deal. And other ones, the other toolpaths, is just checking it for me. Let's just center that into my job again. Okay. And now we can go ahead and get those toolpaths all done up. Now, let's check our material setup again, just to be sure everything's fine. Everything looks good there. Perfect. That's no big deal. Again, it's just telling me that some of the toolpaths I've already created are going to cut through my material, but we already know that's going to happen. That's perfectly fine. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to think about how I want this to cut out. Now I'm going to use this V-bit, this 60-degree V-bit, and we are going to use it to create a faux chamfer around the outside of this stool. That way it's going to give it a nice soft finish, and the handle will feel good in your hand when you're trying to carry it around. It won't have too many sharp edges. If you have vcarve, a Desktop Pro, or Aspire, then the chamfer toolpath is built in, so you could use that instead. But we're just going to literally run this V-bit along a line using a profile toolpath. So let's grab those two vectors. hold down my shift key, that vector, where I'll choose a profile toolpath. We're going to start on the top of my material. We're going to go down 0.25 of an inch. That's going to go down 1/4 inch into our material. Let's select a new tool. Make sure it's hardwood. We'll select that 60-degree V-bit. We'll select that. We're going to edit those settings in there. We're just going to make sure everything is right for this material and machine. I'm going to change this to 8,000. We're going to make sure we change this to millimeters per second. We're going to change this to 35, change this to 8. We don't have a tool changer, so we're going to take out that tool number. That looks good. Everything else seems good, so click OK. It's going to take 4 passes. That seems to be a bit much. So let's go back into our tool for a second, and let's change our pass depth to be 125. That's probably lots. That's probably good for this tool. Press OK. That's 2 passes. That's even better. We're going to go on that line. All this is totally fine. We're not cutting through our material. We're just actually going to profile that, and I'm going to name it V-bit, and we'll calculate that. And then we'll preview that visible toolpath. And that looks really good. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Okay, let's turn back on our vectors again. And now let's pocket out these 4 in the middle based on what we had learned from the last test fitting that we have. So let's grab those right there. Do a pocket toolpath. Start at 0. We're going to go Z plus 0.01 of an inch. We're going to use 1/4 inch end mill. Let's just edit that just to make sure that it's correct. That's exactly the same tool we had before. That's great. Edit our passes. Again, really important to do that. We'll delete out these top 2. Click OK. We don't need any offsets. Fine. Ramp and plunge moves. Nope. We can use the pocket allowance. Remember, this is where we want to put in that number. So minus 0.005. That's the one that's going to fit. I know that because I've already done it. That looks good. And we can go ahead and calculate that. Now, in this case, I know I skipped over the ramp and plunge moves. I could add in some ramp and plunge moves. Again, that way, when I plunge in, it'll actually be nice and gentle on my tool. I know with my machine that we're using that I don't need to worry about that too much, but that is something you might want to consider, but I'm just going to leave that out for now. We'll calculate that. It's going to cut through my material. I know that. Let's preview that visible toolpath. Great. And the last toolpath we need is a profile toolpath to cut this whole thing out. So let's go to our profile toolpath. Let's turn back on our vectors. Select this vector here, hold down my shift key, and this vector there. Okay, we are going to select the 1/4 inch end mill from our tool database here. We're just going to quickly go in and edit that to make sure everything is all right. So we're going to go a little bit deeper every time. Turn up our spindle speed to 18,000 millimeters per second. We can make that 35.8. Now that's good. So let's click OK. We're going to go outside that line. We're not going to do a separate last pass. We're going to add in some tabs. Those are perfectly good size. I want to manually put these tabs in because I want to have control over where they belong. That's where I like them to be. Let's close that down. We're going to use ramp and plunge moves like we had set up before, and leads as well. That's great. Ramps and leads. Everything's happy there. Let's calculate that. Now this is where that warning came up. It says that it's going to clip some of those ramps and leads, and that's okay because there's probably the ones that are in the handle that aren't going to fit. So we're just going to say, okay, that's not a big deal. And let's preview that visible toolpath. Oh, we didn't cut all the way through the material, so we need to change that. See, I didn't do my cut depth. This is a beautiful thing about our software is that I only would see that because our preview of our toolpaths are accurate. So let's just change this up really quick to be Z plus 0.01. Okay, everything else is fine. We need to edit those passes. We're going to delete out those first 2. Click OK. Everything else should be good. We're going to get those same warnings. Undo that last one. Let's preview this visible toolpath. And there we have it. There are our tabs. You can see that those ramps and leads were removed from this part of it because it won't fit in there. But everything looks good. I'm happy with that. Now at this point, I can go ahead and save off my toolpath. I've already done that. I've already cut a finished part. So let's go ahead and take a look at some footage of that being cut. I really like the way this turned out using all the stuff that I learned from that first shop stool that I made. Everything fits together nice and tight, thanks to me making a good accurate measurement, making sure I changed up those pockets so that these legs fit in really nice, and changing the length of those tabs that are on the top of these legs. It's really great, and it's really highly customizable. You can make this for a kid, you can make it a bit shorter for maybe a little kid's stool at their table. You can do all kinds of stuff with this. You know, I'm really kind of happy with how it all turned out. Now, like I said before, this is available to be used in your free trial of any of our core software packages. So if you're new to Vectric, why don't you give it a shot, and you might be able to even cut this out on your CNC machine. Anyway, for now, if you like that video, why don't you give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And if you have any comments, leave them below and I'll answer them as soon as I can. For now, I hope that you keep making fun stuff and keep yourself safe.